Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. I hope everyone is doing well on this 15th day of February 2019. As was expected earlier today, President Trump signed into law the controversial spending bill, which obviously dealt with keeping the government open through September, but also the funding for his border wall. At the same time, he declared a national emergency and was giving a speech and answered several questions in the Rose Garden earlier this morning. I will get to that in a little bit, but first I want to read to you an article from ABC that deals with national emergencies, because obviously with it being centered around President Trump, everything gets trumped up and hyped up, and everything seems to be a bigger deal. But how big of a deal is it? Well, according to the Federal Register, 58 national emergencies have been declared since the National Emergency Act of 1976 was signed into law by President Gerald Ford, and 31 have been annually renewed and are currently still in effect, as listed in the Federal Register. So we still have national emergencies that have been declared by Jimmy Carter that are still open, President Bill Clinton, several by President George W. Bush, and several by President Barack Obama. Now, I don't recall a big stink, a huge story, a huge moral or constitutional crisis of this country when those respective presidents declared their national emergencies. Now, of course, according to the mainstream media and the anti-Trumpers out there, Barack Obama could do no wrong. If you were a neoconservative, George W. Bush could do no wrong. Clinton is obviously everybody's favorite president, so he could do no wrong. And the list continues. But President Trump wants to do something that actually is for the betterment and security of this country, something that the government is actually tasked with doing, and he catches holy hell. But it's not to be surprised. Now, what many of us probably don't even know, and I didn't know this until I did some research on this, because I didn't know there were 31 that were still open, and I didn't know that President Trump had even declared a few other national emergencies himself. This one today would make his fourth. But allow me to read to you his most recent one, other than today's, which was back in November 27th of 2018. It reads the following. The national emergency with respect to blocking property of certain persons contributing to the situation in Nicaragua was declared by President Trump in response to violence in the Ortega regime's systematic dismantling and undermining of democratic institutions and the rule of law that constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. Now, where was all of the fuss about this? Where were all the holier-than-thou people coming out to protest for the Nicaraguans? The poor little Nicaraguans. Where were they? This was only a couple months ago. Not to mention the other ones he had written back in September of 2018 and one back in December of 2017. Where were they? Where was the hysteria? Why the hysteria for this one? Simple. It's political. He made a campaign promise that had to deal with immigration, building a border wall, which is being built, by the way, or renovated. And the Democrats don't want him to have another win. Love him or hate him, Donald Trump has made several campaign promises when he was candidate Trump and has made good on quite a few of them. In this one, because it's gained so much publicity and gets his crowds so energized that the Democrats just can't stand to give him any piece of success when it comes to this type of legislation for his border wall. So he declared a national emergency. I think the wall needs to be built. I think we got a lot of problems at our southern border that have not been dealt with by previous administrations. It's all been talked about by previous administrations, really serious conversation going back to President Reagan. But Reagan did next to nothing. H.W. Bush did next to nothing. Clinton did next to nothing. W. did next to nothing. President Obama did next to nothing. So now it's here, it's laid at the feet of President Trump. I'm sure the man doesn't want to have to deal with this or a whole host of other problems that exist in this country simply because issue after issue has been kicked further and further down the road. He wants to end it. Now, maybe this is just his style. This is his business style. He doesn't have access to a printing press when he's Donald Trump, entrepreneur and businessman, so he has to get things done. He has a timeline. He has a budget. He has payroll to make. He can't continuously kick things further and further down the road. So he sees a problem. He's concerned about the people in his country, and he wants to solve it. And he wants to solve a problem that has been identified by both Republicans and Democrats, one administration after the next, saying this is a problem. We have a war on drugs. We have gangs coming into this country that should not be here. We are a sovereign country, period, end of story. That should be enough justification for having strict laws. You either have borders or you don't. We either are a country or we are not. This is rather commonsensical to me. This shouldn't become hyperbolic. People shouldn't be going off the reservation when it comes to this topic. The president swears an oath to protect this country. Well, countries have borders. Countries have laws. The United States of America has laws. We do need to reform our immigration. There's no question about it, and I think the president wants to take that on next. Will he be successful? Well, that's anybody's guess. I mean, he does have divided government. I think he's shown time and time again over these 2 years that he is more than willing to come across the aisle, meet with Chuck and Nancy and any other Democrat who wants to have a serious conversation to get things done. Some things that might upset Republicans, some things that might upset Democrats. Well, too bad. Too bad if the Democrats and Republicans, the politicians in Washington, D.C. are mad or upset. What about the people of this country? What's their say? Unbelievable. Now, before I get to some of the discussion in his speech in the Rose Garden, of course, without fail, there is obviously an investigation into this decision-making process. I kid you not, we should not be surprised by this. I told you this was coming. The House is controlled by the Democrats. They're going to come hard, fast, and often. So here's an article out of Reuters. U.S. House panel announces emergency declaration probe in letter to Trump. A key committee in the U.S. House of Representatives announced on Friday it was launching an immediate investigation into President Donald Trump's national emergency declaration, saying his move to fund his promised wall at the U.S.-Mexico border raised constitutional and statutory issues. In a letter to Trump, Democrats who control the House Judiciary Committee asked the Republican president to make available for a hearing White House and Justice Department officials involved in the action. They also requested legal documents on the decision that led to the declaration, setting a deadline of next Friday. Quote, "We believe your declaration of an emergency shows a reckless disregard for the separation of powers and your own responsibilities under our constitutional system," said the letter signed by committee chairman Jerry Nadler and other top Democrats on the panel. So there you have it, folks. There's Jerry Nadler again, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, which, if you recall not too long ago, was the same committee that did that disgraceful and distasteful hearing with then acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. So President Trump declares a national emergency. Chairman Nadler announces an emergency declaration probe in a letter to President Trump. So we'll have another circus. Will they go? Will somebody have to go and testify in front of the panel? We'll find out, but I guess we have until next Friday. That was the request. That was the request. Now, President Trump did give a short speech, short talk in the Rose Garden today, and did answer some questions from the press. As you can imagine, it got a little bit combative, which is par for the course, especially depending on the news agency that he is speaking with at the time. Also in the Rose Garden, President Trump invited the angel families. If you're unaware, the angel families, angel moms, angel dads, are those who had lost sons, daughters, husbands, and wives to illegal immigrants. So I think if people want to get emotional, as they usually do, especially when it comes to Donald Trump, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you may fall, that's serious. Having members of those families there in support of the president and in support of a country enforcing its laws and erecting a border wall to make sure that what happened to these families doesn't happen to yours or to mine or to anybody else's. That's emotional. That's personal. And in many respects, that's how it should be. Again, this is commonsensical. We have drugs pouring into this country. Look at the statistics. It'll make you sick how many drugs come into this country. How many people are dying from overdoses. We have tens of thousands of people all over this country. It's not like it's geographically specific. Is it harder hit in some areas? Absolutely. Absolutely it is. But this is nationwide. It isn't confined just to Pennsylvania and Ohio or some of the Rust Belt states. It's all over the country. Tens of thousands of people dying, needlessly. Needlessly. But that's not an emergency because it's who? Oh, that's right. It's President Donald Trump in the Oval Office, and we can't have him solving any problems. And of course, that isn't a problem because what? That's right. President Donald Trump is in the Oval Office. So we can't solve problems and we can't even admit that we have them. Because God forbid, this whack job that they declare, being the president, gets something done. That's sick in my mind. We have people dying and suffering. You have families suffering because they have loved ones who are dying or are suffering from addiction. And it's not a problem. It's not an emergency. Look the other way, pay no attention to it. It's a big problem. And then, of course, the 800-pound gorilla in the room that nobody seems to want to touch, especially not on the Democratic side, are the issues related to human trafficking and sex trafficking. They don't even want to say those words, which is really suspicious in my mind. I mean, I'm tempted to almost go conspiratorial here and get all tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, but something's amiss. Something is really amiss here. I mean, think about it. You had President Trump give his Oval Office speech where he was really trying to get the country together, inform the country that, he was pretty much going to do this anyway, declare a national emergency, but he was really hoping to get a deal through Congress because this is such a commonsensical issue. You've had Democrats before give speech after speech on the House floor, on the Senate floor, at the White House, saying we support this, this needs to be done, and then, of course, Trump's there and done. They make no mention of the human trafficking and the sex trafficking that's taking place. That in and of itself should be an emergency. That's something that should never take place anywhere, let alone the United States of America. We're supposed to be better than that. We're supposed to be better than that. But who seems to care? We're supposed to be concerned about women's rights and girls all over the world having the chance to succeed. Yet, when it comes to human trafficking and sex trafficking to be sold into sex slavery and prostitution, they couldn't care less. There's no mention of it. They don't want to go down that rabbit hole. And there's no question that would be a dark and deep rabbit hole that goes into some of the darkest pits of the human soul. But it's that evil, it's that wrong, it's taking place in this country. The mainstream media doesn't talk about it. The Democrats don't want to talk about it. Hell, you don't even have a lot of Republicans talking about it. So I got to pat President Trump on the back for raising awareness to this. You want to talk about other people suffering needlessly? It's these women and girls, and I'm sure there's young men involved too. It's ridiculous. That in and of itself, in my mind, constitutes an emergency, because that type of thing should never be happening, again, anywhere, but especially not in the United States of America. It happens in this country because we're wealthy, and people think, well, I got money, they can afford it, and that's what they're going to do. Shame on those people, and I hope those people are caught and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I'm telling you, folks, it's becoming more and more a war, not of left versus right, but right versus wrong. That's what we're in the middle of right here. Now, some other things a little bit unrelated and then related to President Trump's speech in the Rose Garden this morning. Some of the reporters obviously asked questions that weren't in regards to the border wall and the national emergency. And one such question, much to my surprise, was somebody actually asked him about the national debt and how he plans on handling that. I was surprised. I don't remember the reporter, but they deserve a Pulitzer Prize just for that. I mean, finally, somebody is asking a serious question around here. And, of course, the president, I have to say, he dithered on his response. I mean, it was not adequate for a second. Not for a second. He snaked and he weaved around this way and that. I got here, and he was saying all the stats about how President Trump doubled it, which is more than all presidents combined before him, which is true. But that's not the question, Mr. President. That's a serious problem. Our debt and deficits are national emergencies. Then he went on to say, well, it wasn't a priority. It wasn't the first priority. The first priority was getting money for the military. And then, of course, he pats himself on the back, $700 billion his first year, $716 billion the next. And if you don't have a military, then what's the point with the national debt, is his rationale. You want to try to square that circle? Go ahead. I'm not going to defend him on that because it needs to be taken into serious consideration, because over the 2 years that he's been there, the national debt has just clipped $22 trillion. And what's he doing about it? Nothing. He wants to talk about Obama. Hey, I'll sit here and have a conversation and blame Obama all day too. But you know you're president. You know what you got yourself into. That needs resolved. And then what was another answer in regards to that question on national debt? We will grow our way out of it. I wanted to pull my hair out when he said that. We're going to grow our way out of it? You could find me a third grader with third grade math skills that could show you that there is no way in hell we are going to grow our way out of $22 trillion in debt and growing. Because there isn't even a serious conversation being had that it's a problem. We are on track to have trillion-dollar deficits for the foreseeable future. And nobody's talking about it. And we're supposed to have a strong economy. You don't have trillion-dollar deficits in a strong economy. You just don't. If you have a strong economy, Uncle Sam should be taking in a lot of money. So he shouldn't have to borrow a whole bunch of money to make up for it. This doesn't make any sense. And of course, he went on, that being the president, saying this is the strongest economy ever. It's the best economy in the world. Breaking record after record. Of course, he talked about the stock market. It's coming back. He expects the stock market to make new highs, hit new records. It's one after the next. Pump it up, pump it up, pumping up. Where are the facts? Where's the concern for the debt? Just doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. I hope it does. I hope he and his team are really working on it. I really hope they are. Because the American people deserve a president and an administration to take that seriously and to do something serious about it. Now, of course, one of the other things that was discussed was the US-China trade talks. Of course, this deal will be the best deal ever made, or it won't be made, according to the president. But I thought the USMCA, that which was replacing NAFTA, which is still yet to receive a vote, I thought that was the best deal ever. It just goes back and forth. I mean, you have to love it. It is amusing to a point, but I'm kind of getting tired of it. This is the best deal ever. That's the best. Okay, we get your job. We get what you're doing. Okay, enough's enough. You're either going to make a deal or you're not. You want to meet with President Xi or you're not. I expect them to meet. I don't expect a really great deal, to be honest with you. And then it's going to have to be voted on, so that could be held up. I just don't see the Chinese caving in on a whole bunch of intellectual property concerns. I just don't see them doing it because President Trump, I mean, he's temporary, right? He's here for another 2 years, maybe another 6. President Xi might be the president of China for the rest of his life. It's just a different time frame. Will they appease us? Absolutely they will. You know, President Trump even said China's being very respectful to us. Of course they are. I'm sure they are. I'm sure that's the truth. They'll be respectful. They'll stroke anybody's ego. They'll do what they have to do. If they can get another delay, they'll get a delay. If there's a 60-day delay to the deadline, I wouldn't be surprised. Because it allows for the president, his administration, to come out and drop more and more breadcrumbs saying a deal's going to come and then the markets rally. A deal's going to come and then the markets rally. So he might very well hit his new records in the stock market by just coming out and saying, well, we're going to make a deal. We continue to negotiate. We know you're going to continue to negotiate. You're making a deal. We're still a couple weeks from the first deadline. You're supposed to be negotiating. So what's the surprise? Why is that positive news? That's what's supposed to be taking place. And then lastly, in regards to the comments in the Rose Garden, President Trump was obviously pressed on the constitutionality, the legality of this whole thing with the national emergency declaration, and what does he expect to happen? Well, he fully expects to be sued. There's really no question on this one. He expects it to go to the Ninth Circuit. He expects for it to be shut down. He expects to lose in the appeal process. Then he expects it to go to the Supreme Court. And he hopes if and when it gets heard by the Supreme Court, it will go the president's way and he will be able to continue building the southern border wall. And then lastly, folks, before I let you go, have a nice long weekend. Don't forget Andrew McCabe of the FBI, well, former employee of the FBI, I should say, will be giving his interview on 60 Minutes this Sunday. So be sure to tune into that because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of juicy details that come out of that. Recall, he is basically accusing Rod Rosenstein of wanting to wear a wire on the president. So Rod Rosenstein says that's not the case. So who's lying? Are there going to be other name drops this Sunday? Make sure you check it out. I'll be watching. And I'll be sure to have a discussion with everybody next week. So take care, everybody. Please share, like, subscribe. Leave your comments. Let's make this interactive. Enjoy your long weekend, President Day weekend. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Kreitis. Godspeed.